Welcome back to Profiteers versus the People. We are back with yet another episode about Peter Thiel. Boy, howdy, did we not expect to talk about this motherfucker for 4 hours. But he is so efficiently evil. He's been keeping us busy for the past few months. Deco 19, in this episode, I think we're finally ready to talk about Palantir. Again, I did not think that our boy Pete would leave this many bodies in his wake for us to wade through, that it would take us this long to really dig into the crown jewel of the Thielverse, and arguably the tool that Peter has most frequently reached for in his little project of tinkering with democracy and removing as many nuts and bolts as possible. But here we are. Right after this. I'm Money Mike.
I'm RadBill. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can now that I've plugged my headphone in appropriately.
Okay, so yeah, this is a four-parter. The last time we did this, it was because everyone involved was living to 100, and that was with the Sacklers. But yeah, we're at a four-parter with a guy who is 50. Just really something. A few episodes ago, we mentioned how Peter Thiel almost got 9/11, and this really bothered him. For how hard it supposedly is for being very wealthy, it sure seems like the rich are infinitely more invested in staying alive. I don't know if you've had this experience, Money Mike, but like the plane starts rattling and it's like, fuck it. Like I'm on good terms with the wife. You know, if this is how it ends, this is how it fucking ends.
In theory, yes. And then every time that I am faced with the actual plane starts rattling moment, I do start clutching to this little plane of existence a lot more firmly than I would have expected myself to.
That's true. Yeah, everyone's a hardened badass until you start choking on something, and then we're all super into this whole being alive thing.
And like choking on something is particularly difficult because the thought passes, am I going to be a guy who dies by choking on his own food?
Yeah.
That is a funeral where at least someone has a joke that they're not saying because it's not appropriate. But they're thinking it, which is almost even worse.
It is. That oh, what a haunting thought. So these folks are super rich. They love being alive. They get much more paranoid about existential threats. They're super fond of vaccines as a cure for the ails of the third world, when in reality, infrastructure like a sophisticated plumbing system would do far more good for far more people for far less money. But here's something I'll posit. Most of these folks have only a tertiary concern for preventing widespread devastation in these impoverished regions. If that concern was front and center, people would occasionally talk about ethical lithium extraction, for example. The reason people like Bill Gates aren't investing in plumbing systems, first and foremost, is because there isn't that much money in plumbing systems. Not when compared to pharmaceuticals. Oh, no. The second reason, though, is because in the immediate future, a plumbing system in a rural African town doesn't prevent Bill Gates from getting malaria. Therein lies the real concern, preventing their own premature death. Thiel, though, took this concern to another level. This dude didn't want to die at all and spent a fortune on technology to prevent death from happening, period.
Yeah, and got really weird and sci-fi-y about it.
Yes,
because,
he did.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the reasons that people like Peter Thiel are so focused on very long-term longevity is because they know that what is most likely going to kill them is old age or some symptom of it. They are wealthy enough that they know that their immediate future is secured. So they can easily turn their attention to the infinite.
Yep, the one last threat in the room.
Yeah, and people who struggle with, economic security, they don't have the bandwidth to worry about forever. They are trying to get through March.
Yeah, so tomorrow.
I feel like the wealthier and more secure your near term is, the more existential you can be. And with Peter Thiel, especially after the plane started shaking, I mean, figuratively, because he wasn't on it on 9/11, the proposition of holy shit, I am immortal, consumed him, and we shouldn't be surprised, his twisted brain twisted it into some weird twisted thing.
Well said. Yeah, the proposition consumed him. Before long, a new idea popped into his head. What if the spiderweb thing that Levchin had created to catch PayPal fraudsters all those episodes ago, which had come to be known as the Igor method, was used to identify terrorists? Readapting a solution used for one enterprise to create another like this would come to be called the PayPal Mafia method. The press really piled on accolades wherever they could. Because there's another name for this. It's, and correct me if I'm wrong, Money Mike, but diversification?
Yeah, it's the symptom of, oh, we built something and spent a lot of money on it, and now we have to kind of figure out what it does.
Yeah, let's find other shit to do with this thing. In reality, the quote-unquote PayPal method gave birth to Silicon Valley, period. In 1957, in Mountain View, California, a handful of engineers at Shockley Semiconductors decided to defect to start Fairchild Semiconductors, which found a way to etch semiconductors onto little pieces of glass, creating a computer chip. The Apollo program would buy hundreds of thousands of these little doodads for space travel, and before long a question was raised. What if instead of using these chips to guide a rocket to the moon, we used them to guide a rocket into a hospital or an elementary school or, some sort of playground or gathering area in the Middle East? This question would set off a string of dominoes which would culminate in Silicon Valley's Big Bang. Ironic, given the counterculture narrative that for decades, the big names in the Valley, Intel, HP, and Fairchild, all survived by suckling on Mother Military Industrial Complex's teat. Off the back of Mother Military, the personal computer, Facebook, and really the entire modern American economy was born. Alas, Peter Thiel was going to use the ridiculously named PayPal Mafia method to get back to Mother Military for one last suckle.
Chapter 1, Palantir is born.
Now, credit where credit's due. Thiel had a knack for identifying trends. Though he carried on steering Clarium towards the rocks of the '08 financial crisis, he knew they were there. Similarly, Peter predicted a rise in military spending, and on this front, he was right as well. In fact, even as Obama dealt a death blow to Clarium by bailing out the banks and auto companies out of sync with Peter's trades, he surprised a great many of those who voted for him by moving military resources from Iraq to Afghanistan instead of moving them out of the Middle East entirely. Further, under his leadership, military spending in the region actually increased. So, this is what Peter Thiel's team was sailing into, but like Elon, Thiel would start this business by loading up a money hose and firing from the hip. In his mind, had the CIA and the FBI had something that could organize data for them, they might have thwarted the most memeable terrorist plot in U.S. history. Why not make that database and sell it to them? This is not the eureka moment it sounds like. Igor, the program Levchin had built to track down fraudsters, was looking at uniform data points and classifying the users represented by those data points as customers or fraudsters. When they presented this idea to experts, they were reminded of the steep climb they faced. You have a binary system that you want to use to determine where people are on a political spectrum and which direction on that spectrum they are moving. Also, who's associated with who? Is there a need for this? Kind of, but this doesn't do much to address it. This is like solving the matter of getting from one side of the country to another by giving the traveler new shoes. Maybe your invention can do it, but using it to solve the problem is going to take a shitload of work.
Well said.
So, Peter was undeterred by this deaf metaphor, or whatever these experts actually said to him. Although his buddies sort of backed out, his next call was to Alex Karp, a buddy of his from law school who looks just like Taika Waititi. I mean, look the guy up. That is a starring role waiting to happen. So Peter needed help raising funds for this new idea. Karp was a good fundraiser, but had trouble in Silicon Valley because Thiel had pissed off the entire town, which Thiel has wanted to do.
He loves to do that. That's his favorite thing.
He's so into that. So the duo went to DC, where In-Q-Tel agreed to invest $2 million. The rest of the money came from Thiel. Now, ironically, after establishing their offices in Facebook's old HQ, Palantir, which is named after this seer's stone that was used by Sauron. No.
Let's just say Palantir is the seeing stones from Lord of the Rings.
Yes.
I don't think that we want to get too deep in Lord of the Rings lore. We'll be here all day. I'll have a great time, but we won't talk about Palantir at all.
I haven't seen it at all. I'll be hanging on by a thread. I know.
God.
It's on the list.
Next time you come over. We're gonna do it. You're gonna come over early, and we're gonna start it at like 6:30 and go until 10:30. That's what we're gonna do.
Yeah. Okay, I'm into it. Okay, unbelievably, they pitched this service with that name as being privacy focused. In theory, the government could use this software to look up information on ordinary Americans, but they wouldn't, because the app would track that activity. It self-governs. We love it when apps do that, and it always works.
That's never led to any issues ever. But
yeah.
The same question always arose in these meetings with government officials. But what if I want to look up my ex-girlfriend? And is the app going to track that?
Oh, you can. You can look up your ex-girlfriend, but Palantir will log the search. So if you don't have a good reason, it'll be pretty embarrassing. You're totally going to have egg on your face.
So I shouldn't register her as a sex offender just to make sure the system works. Interesting.
Got it. Yeah, no, I had a great reason. My wife's with Al-Qaeda. It's in everyone's best interest
We should just call the SWAT team at her house right now. And if there's a guy named Bill there, shoot that man dead. He's
Al-Qaeda too. It's in everyone's best interest that I find out who she's going out to dinner with tonight.
And if you could please measure his penis after he's dead, that is also just very important for
national
Americans.
Security concern. Yes, that's right. Knowing his dick length and diameter.
Yes, very important. It's
going to prevent the next 9/11, 9/12. Yeah.
But we love it when governments are being regulated by private interests. That always ends well.
Especially when it's done in a self-governing manner. That's really good. Yeah.
Yes.
So, Karp seemed sincere in his belief that this would work. They still had a hard time selling the product, though. But then Thiel had an idea. Let's make a version of this for hedge funds. I know a group that'll be all over this. And indeed, Thiel was exactly right. And Clarium would become their very first paying customer. This sounds pathetic, and it is, but not completely. If they wanted to sell this thing to the government, they had to have other clients. Karp played into this by seemingly pitching the software to anyone who would listen. And with Clarium paying for a subscription, the company began winning modest contracts from the CIA and other intelligence agencies. When the NYPD signed on before quickly abandoning the platform, it caught the attention of J.P. Morgan, and Alex Karp had a perfect product for them. They signed on for Palantir's security software, which became a huge scandal. And they also signed on for their finance software, Metropolis, which was horrible garbage, but more on that later.
In 2018, it went public that the JP Morgan executive team was tracking the GPS locations of employees as well as their emails and their activity in chat rooms. And it was discovered that the Palantir admin was also using it to track emails exchanged by the executive team. It was a big mess, actually.
Fortunately for Peter, luck came to his rescue once again. Yeah. The man is lucky above all else. In March of 2009, GhostNet, a Chinese malware operation was discovered by a team of Canadian engineers. This discovery was published in a report which was then written up in the New York Times with an image of a James Bond-esque web of associated parties and information. This also mentioned the origin of this exciting software, Palantir. And to the uninitiated, this looked like quite the achievement on the part of the PayPal leadership who played a role in the founding of Palantir. With those more familiar with Palantir's functionality, though, it was obvious that the company's role in this discovery was modest. To those who got their hands on the actual report, something else became obvious as well. Palantir paid to underwrite this report. It was advertising. The diagrams shown in the Times article and the report were generated for illustrative purposes. Further, the diagrams shown in the Times article and that report were generated for illustrative purposes after the report had been completed.
Which sounds a little sketchy.
Yeah.
Doesn't it? But I think an important question is, while this was obviously deceptive, why do it?
Yeah.
And the answer is because this resembled military work. And the whole uphill battle that they're fighting right now is for them to look more established. So Mama Military Industrial Complex will open her shirt and remove her bra.
Yes.
That was visceral. I'm sorry.
It's good. No, it's I like it. You really painted a picture there. They have to LARP a little while first before they can get in with the military.
Fake it until you make it. It is pure.
Bingo. There it is. It's one more thing that Alex Karp can point at. You see, their competition, Raytheon, Lockheed Martin, and the rest, were all well-established players who had spent decades and millions of dollars lobbying Congress.
Not bribing.
Yes, Congress to award them contracts. Peter had money, but couldn't afford to spend the time it would take to adequately lobby members of Congress as a standalone effort. Besides, why do that when he could just do what he did with PayPal? Get the Army's attention by infiltrating their ranks. Simple. With a first hits free approach, offer the product to medium/high ranking members of the Army. Sure, the product isn't very good, but tweak it to match the needs of these officials and win their support. These men included Colonel Harry Tunnell, who wanted to abandon the Army's then widely adapted approach of training locals to fight terrorists, which we called counterinsurgency, and instead focus on an approach of just going in, weeding out terrorists, and just killing them. In his mind, this far more aggressive and dangerous approach would be the only real solution. About a year after Tunnell deployed in 2009, he convinced the Army to pay for a version of Thiel's software that his team could use. It could be used in the field, offline, and would update when connected to internet once again. And now we're going to introduce a segment that Money Mike has not heard me stop talking about since we started this podcast. It's called How Do Dat, Doodad, Doodad. We finally get to debut it here. So, Money Mike, how do dat, doodad, doodad? How do dat, doodad, doodad?
Well, if you've ever shared a Google document with a friend, you'll know that while you're working on one part of whatever you're doing, they can work on a different part, and you can see them working on that different part in real time.
Yes.
And if you lose internet connection and carry on typing, whenever the internet reconnects, all the changes will be uploaded at once. And this is what Thiel's team built for Tunnell. But instead of a Google Doc, it was a 3D chart maker. Tunnell's team wanted to use this to mark which houses in the field they suspected might smell a little terroristy. Yes. Now, surprisingly cutesy, all things considered. Okay, now back to the show.
While they were waiting on the Army to approve their use of this software, which the Army would have to pay for, 30 of Tunnell's men died. And his team would then blame the Army's not moving faster to pay for this software for these deaths.
And what Thiel is doing here is fucked up. It's Peter Thiel. If he had a product that he knew would make things better, that's one thing. But he didn't.
Yeah. There was no product. He wasn't coming in and solving a problem. He was coming in and saying, I want to make something that you guys can use.
Exactly. He had money and the desire to make something that would soon be rendered useless by D6A, which the US government had already spent $10 billion to make.
Now, how Doodad? Doodad, Doodad. How Doodad, Doodad.
I don't fucking know. And we don't have enough time for me to look into it. So just know that Peter Thiel was doing something fucked up, no surprise. And the thing that he made for the army was very, very quickly rendered obsolete and stupid.
And everyone in the army knew that it would be rendered obsolete and stupid. Yeah. And also, like, if anyone listening is wondering why we didn't look into what D6A does, it's because of that. This is a huge, complicated military software thing that we don't understand, that would take a long while to understand, and we're not entirely certain we wouldn't be put on some list for researching it in great detail. It feels like one of those. Like,
yeah. I'm just trying to stay off lists.
Yeah, same. As few as I can be on, I want to be on. Anyways, 30 men died. The way Peter Thiel and the ghouls at Palantir would tell it in future marketing efforts would mirror what was said by Tunnel and his men. These deaths were the result of the Army's delay in adopting their product. In reality, these men died either as a result of the dangerous nature of the work being done, or because Palantir had successfully taken them hostage, and I'm inclined to believe the former. Here's why. What Palantir made for Tunnel was not updating in combat zones. There was no bottleneck that Palantir was going to address here. This is a nice to have, not a have to have. What Palantir made for Tunnel was not updating in combat zones. It was updating when the people in the field returned to base. How is this thing going to work? Maybe this was a sleek and easy to read solution, but if it isn't updating in the field, what makes it better functionally than a snapshot of the area taken by aircraft that's then marked up with crayon? Like, just give me a marker, right? And then take a picture before you go out there. Before long, other brigades got a hold of the software, and word eventually reached the head of intelligence in Afghanistan, a man of fantastic repute, Major General Michael Flynn. In early 2010, Palantir's engineers gave Flynn a demo, and Flynn made an urgent request to the DoD for enough licenses for the entire deployment of Afghanistan. He then criticized the Pentagon's current database software as being inadequate. Now, importantly, we mentioned before that Thiel wasn't focusing all of his financial efforts on lobbying, but he wasn't above lobbying. It just wasn't the primary focus. He had Flynn climbing the ranks, who was continuing to advocate for Palantir's database technology. When he rose to head of the Defense Intelligence Agency, loud as his misguided pleas for mass adoption were, the Army still carried on ignoring them. Before long, though, those cries began harmonizing with some on the civilian side. Terry Paul, a lobbyist who Thiel hired to help sway Congress, got the ear of Duncan Hunter, a representative from California who demanded hearings on the Army's resistance to the adoption of Palantir's technology. Alas, Thiel had progress. However, these hearings would backfire. During a trial in 2013, Ramon Odierno went off on Hunter after Hunter implied that Odierno was failing soldiers in the field by not allowing them to buy Palantir. Here's what Odierno said. I'm tired of somebody telling me that I don't care about our soldiers. He then defended DSIGs as vastly improved relative to the software available while he was in Iraq in 2003 and suggested Hunter didn't understand it. Bear in mind, Hunter hadn't spent any time in Iraq. Hunter had never seen a battlefield. No one selling Palantir had. The encounter made the two men internet famous in military circles. Ramon for standing his ground, and Hunter for looking like a dipshit. Unsurprisingly, this incident would pose a setback for Palantir in the future, though other potential PR disasters seemed to roll off their back. Flynn would eventually be removed from his post at the DIA for mismanagement. Soon thereafter, investigators were analyzing the man's ties to Russia.
Whoopsie.
Whoopsie daisies. Yeah, I think that's where everyone's heard his name anyways. That's kind of the thing he's notorious.
I don't know much about Michael Flynn, but I know that Russia is often in the conversation.
I know. I was like, when we wrote that part earlier, we were kind of banking that all of our listeners would go, uh-oh, whoopsie, the Russia guy. Yeah. And I'm hoping that all of you did. Yeah.
Yeah. When I was first listening to The Contrarian, where, we're getting most of our data here, I heard Flynn's name and I was like, ooh, I've heard that somewhere.
Peter, not keeping the best company here.
Yeah, and I was like, wow, he really does dig up the worst of the worst. Like, I have just really been continually impressed by his ability to scrape the bottom of the barrel in really any arena that he dances in.
To a cartoonish degree, right? Like, every single time you flip the next page on any of these people and it's either like, okay, Nazi.
Yeah, it's like
criminal, one or the other, like, without fail.
Does this guy have any nice friends? And honestly, it doesn't seem so.
Leaning further into that, after Tunnel parted ways with the military, his unit was investigated for committing war crimes, which should come as no surprise. Captain Aggressive wound up doing some pretty bad shit over in the Middle East. Though he was never implicated personally, this was a damning indictment of his more aggressive strategies. Send men on a search and destroy mission, and most mistakes will lead to the destruction of something that isn't a target. It's a good rule of thumb. Yeah, Duncan Hunter was eventually charged with campaign finance violations. It is literally everyone that this guy talks to.
Again, it's like instead of resumes, they give him rap sheets. It is truly impressive. Truly impressive.
He pled to a lesser charge than fraud, which he was originally indicted, and ultimately wound up resigning his seat in 2020. These revelations probably blew over because they didn't have anything to do with Palantir directly. But it does indicate the kind of person with whom the company sought to partner with. And Money Mike's already made this point. Mostly opportunists, right? Yeah. Like, it's opportunists and bastards. And that's pretty much it.
And often that Venn diagram is a fucking circle.
Straight up,
opportunist bastards. And actually, the book did make a point to talk about that. Like, Peter tends to align himself with C or D list individuals who have a couple marks on their sheet, either politically or socially or whatever. But yeah, bastard opportunists are this guy's bread and fucking butter.
Dude, C or D list anyone, be it celebrities, businessmen, whoever, that is a depraved bunch. Like, stay away from C or D list celebrities. Holy shit, y'all.
Yeah,
be careful.
Yeah, they are monsters, I think is the word I'm looking for.
Yes, C and D list anything that's a scary bunch.
Yeah.
In 2010, Palantir began working with H.P. Gary and Verico in pursuit of a $24 million a year contract to build an intelligence operation against critics of the Chamber of Commerce. And one of these days, we're going to do a thing on the Chamber of Commerce, because every time they meander into our research, there's always that, like, oh my God moment.
Yeah.
The three companies, PayPal Mafia'd, were working on this proposal and pitched the very same thing to Bank of America to counter efforts by WikiLeaks. Now, Money Mike, how do that, Doodad, do that?
So Palantir is using the same functionality here that they built for the military, but PayPal Mafia-ing it once again. We had that same Google Doc doodad that Tunnel's team was using to commit war crimes that people can edit, and it will update with those edits in real time as soon as it's connected to their web. But now, instead of soldiers updating the Google Doc, journalists are updating the Google Doc, and they're doing it unknowingly by posting on social media.
That's it. Yeah, so all this is doing is going, okay, every time one of these guys posts on social media, put it in this one place. And that's Palantir. Like, we're doing this how do that piece to show you that this really isn't very complicated technology here. It's a data scrape.
Yeah, I think that people like Peter Thiel have made a living sensationalizing simple things that they got lucky with and acting like they knew way more about things they didn't know about.
Straight up.
And here we are, you know?
Yep. Here we fucking are. Now, Anonymous broke this story, which has got to be some sort of litmus test to the kind of person you are. If Anonymous is like, we're thwarting your actions.
If you have to be thwarted, like good guys are never thwarted.
Yeah, right. Glenn Greenwald, one of the targeted journalists, made a big stink of it too. This was quite the scandal, and although Alex Karp had apologized and publicly distanced himself from HP Gary privately, Thiel's team was like unfazed by this. A few employees were put on leave, but they received promotions and bonuses upon return, Wall Street style. And the company promised that they would set up infrastructure to allow employees to report concerning activity like this in the future.
We'll make sure we don't do anything like that again. And we're gonna put in so many programs and we're gonna put in so many ethics lines. So if people want to raise their hand and get fired for it, they can. Because the morality of our company is really driven by the people at the bottom who have the most to lose. That wasn't a direct quote, but you know, I mean, that's kind of
it really gets the point across, I think.
Shtick, yeah.
Yeah. Hey, does anyone want to blow a whistle?
Yeah.
It's okay. You can blow the whistle. Does anyone? Yeah.
Yeah, don't look at the gun that I have behind my head.
Right. Now, this was demoralizing for some staff who complained privately that those punished were doing exactly as they were told.
The Nazis had a very, very similar approach to following orders or something like that.
Yeah, the most cartoonish villains in the world. Oh, we had no idea that was going to happen.
We shouldn't be laughing.
Yeah, right. A few months later, though, the discouragement would be shooed away. The death of Osama bin Laden was announced. Now, though they wouldn't explicitly say when pressed, leadership spent a lot of time flirtatiously implying that, indeed, Palantir was on the killing team. A best-selling book called The Finish attributed the team's success to two innovations. The Predator drone, which allowed specialists to sweep the area undetected and gain a thorough understanding of everything they were looking at. The second was the Total Information Awareness Program, which helped keep track of all the data gathered by those drones. Now, officially, the book explained, the TIA program had expired, though substantively, the program had been helped along by Silicon Valley startups, like Palantir, quote unquote.
RadBill, real quick, have you ever been to the 9/11 Museum in New York City?
Not to the museum. I went to the memorial.
So they have a video about the team that got Osama, along with like Hillary Clinton, I think was in there, Barack Obama, like presidents talking about this operation. And the level of grisly detail that they go into for a room of parents and children about just murking people is jarring.
I bet.
There's this particular person talking, and like there's the the patriotic triumphant music going behind it, and like I'm not quoting directly here, but essentially the guy goes like, and then the bad guy's wife stepped out to defend him, took her out, took out the son, and I'm just like, what? The women and
what
the
are we doing here?
Like we didn't even think to take that little bit out. Like, I mean, I'm sure it happened. And I had this conversation with somebody else, and they were like, dude, everyone in there was probably a bad guy. And I'm not here to debate yes or no. But again, the fact that passed the screens, we were like, yeah, we're going to talk about violence against women and children in the museum.
Yeah, we feel like the public will still be sympathetic to that.
Fucking wild. Yeah, yes, that is just anyway. Yeah, I just wanted to talk about that little bit. Next time we're in New York, we're gonna have to go together and
we'll check it out for sure.
Just marvel at that, because it is something to behold.
I'm very down to check that out.
But anyway, back to Palantir and how they know.
Yeah, now this was marketing gold. Even though it's just like Palantir. 2 words, basically using it as an example. The only media outlet refuting the implied scale of Palantir's involvement in the mission was Gawker. Like we said in our last episode, every now and again, they do some journalism. It was infrequent before their demise.
Yeah.
Yeah. Years later, a reporter in New York, Sharon Weinberger, corroborated Gawker's stance, saying that no one she knew in national security or intelligence thought Palantir had any significant role in that mission. Plenty of officials who used the software at the time described it as being useful as a visual aid. Like we alluded to before, this is a tool for putting everything on one page.
Yeah, and to be fair, this is a pretty common sales tactic.
Yes.
A list of clients that a company has doesn't really indicate the degree to which the company works with each client.
Yes.
And Palantir was as guilty of this behavior as a Silicon Valley startup can be. I saw something online once where like a guy on LinkedIn put all of the companies in which he was an investor in, like he had like a couple shares of stock in his work experience. Like, I'm an investor at Microsoft. And this is the exact same thing.
I'm reminded of that old Camille Nanjiani bit about cheese, the drug epidemic sweeping the nation, and it was Tylenol PM and heroin. Like, the drone is heroin, right? Like, that's the thing doing all the killing and all of the, like, groundbreaking shit. Yeah.
It's just heroin, gang.
It is pretty much just heroin. Anywho, Business Insider called it the War on Terror's secret weapon. Other outlets and the ACLU took the bait by believing the rumors that were conjured up by Karp and the Palantir team to market their service line and warned of the threats posed by Palantir to the privacy of American citizens. Forbes wrote a piece introducing Palantir as Big Brother, and The Guardian called it a sinister cyber surveillance scheme. All seemingly unaware of what the program was truly capable of, which was basically nothing.
Nothing at all.
This doesn't really do anything. Nonetheless, this seemed like a big break for Palantir. Before long, generals were calling Peter about his new killer app. Hype had sent the company's valuation far into the sky almost on its own. In 2011, the company's valuation was $2.5 billion. Already ridiculous. In 2013, a $100 million funding round brought the company's valuation to $9 billion. The presentation deck had pretty diagrams, and their demos must have been pretty strong because those familiar with the product, again, were pretty adamant that the value just wasn't there. Remember, Metropolis was the finance product they had sold to JP Morgan. Well, JP Morgan wanted to use the product to analyze mortgages, and to accommodate, Palantir took the existing Metropolis software, which they touted was ideal for looking at historic pricing or weather reports, and basically rebuilt the thing from scratch. After rebuilding the program, 120 engineers from Palantir, classified as being forward deployed, had to work out of the JP Morgan offices just to maintain the thing. Though it did kind of work, using the platform, as we've stated before, required enormous effort from JP Morgan employees. Also, as a note, the product was sold to big supply chain companies, which meant extensive retooling and a product that was never any good for them either.
Yeah, and keep in mind, even where it's being used to help HP Gary track the social media of journalists, the social media posts are all there on the platform anyways.
Yeah.
Palantir just takes these posts and puts them all on one screen, which has some degree of value, but like RadBill said, it isn't this magic black box thing.
Yeah.
HP Gary likely could have gotten their hands on a competing product pretty easily, which I'll call an intern. But as the Gen AI revolution has taught us, companies will literally do anything if it means they might not have to pay a person to do something.
100%, right?
They will buy the most garbage gum and toothpick platform that they can just to avoid giving someone health insurance. It is bananas.
Yeah, and right around this time, the whole free intern thing, people were starting to sour on that a little.
Yeah, which, I mean, you know.
What do you do?
Probably, yeah.
Yeah, it is probably for the best. So Palantir's government product worked better than Metropolis, but it still wasn't great, and Thiel's team was struggling to get into the fold with decision makers in the Obama administration and in the armed forces, where their reputation still bore the stain of Hunter's comments to Odierno. When the time came for the DSIG's replacement, the Army wanted a ground-up solution. $8 billion would go to whoever won this contract. Crucially, though, they signaled that they would only welcome bids from military contractors. Palantir and all the other commercial contractors would not even be invited to bid. Now here, Palantir goes into panic mode. This spells the end of their entire business. So they lean on Duncan Hunter once again, and Thiel's friend Glenn Beck writes a book suggesting that Palantir's not being invited to bid was an act that stank of corruption. But neither effort worked. So in 2014, Peter Thiel sued the US government. While he did this, Alex Karp took the business to Europe to try his hand at selling Gotham, which was their military-oriented
fucking names are so
corny, right?
God damn, dude. God damn. It's like someone put a Disney adult at the helm of a company. Fucking agonizing.
It's brutal, right?
Oh, my God. Anyway.
Yeah, Alex thought that there could be a market for Gotham to big industrial companies in Europe, so out he went. Now, although the act of positioning Palantir as a consulting firm, which it basically was, think about their work with JP Morgan, instead of a tech startup, could have dire consequences for the company's valuation, the team in Europe did do some consulting work during Karp's time there, and it would have dire consequences of a different sort. After helping a large European bank surveil its staff, same way they did for JP Morgan, to determine who might quit or who was banging who.
Which is also just scraping emails and discourse from company message boards, just, you know.
Yeah, as an aside.
Just more nefarious. It's email scraping for nefarious and shitty purposes. But again, you know, someone said once that they think that, actually it might have been you, RadBill, but they think that large institutions bring in consultants to suggest all of the morally questionable things that leadership at the company is afraid to actually suggest, and then if it all goes wrong, they can blame it on the consultant as opposed to the executive who greenlit it. But anyway, sorry.
Totally. That wouldn't... No, it's okay. I hope I said that. That's very insightful, and it's right. Yeah, I believe that. But yeah, Karp and a new hire, Alfredus.
That's a name. That's a name right there, motherfucker. Yep.
Alfredus, who we'll call Alfred, Chmielauskas.
Nice. I think you nailed that.
I think I did. They were introduced to Alex Nix, who had a startup of his own called Cambridge Analytica. Now, Nix said that he was modeling the software off of Palantir, but Chmielauskas knew that Palantir's software sucked. What was really going on here? Also, would Nix like to hire Palantir?
Their software would be a perfect fit. Just ask Alex Karp.
Yeah. Oh, it's perfect for everything. Yeah, that was basically all Alex Karp was doing. So, because of the political nature of Cambridge Analytica's work, Palantir resisted a partnership, but to keep the relationship warm, Chmielauskas offered Nix advice in case Palantir changed its mind. And seemingly they did. A Cambridge Analytica whistleblower would report that Palantir employees were given access to the Cambridge Analytica offices, and they were given passwords to the computers to help Nix's team harvest data and send targeted political ads to 87 million Americans. Their secret weapon? Dumbass Facebook personality quizzes designed to harvest information from Facebook users and gain access to those on their friends list. This is like it's dad bait, right? Like
it's dad bait now, but when this was happening, what year was this?
2015, 2014, 15, 16.
Yeah, not long before 2014 and 2015, there was a college kid trying to figure out what onion he was, and that was me.
I was doing the same thing. Which Hangover character are you? I was hoping I was Bradley Cooper,
turns
but
out
I never was.
I'm much more of a sweet onion than a sandwich onion.
I could see that. Yeah, I could see that. You're definitely not a red onion either.
Yeah. Is a red onion a sandwich onion? Someone made the observation that red onions are never cooked and they're always raw in like salads and on sandwiches. And white onions are usually cooked in some capacity.
That's
I don't know.
Interesting. Yeah, because like I feel like a red onion in a sandwich is like pepper spray in a sandwich.
Dude, fucking amen, dude. Like when you bite into a burger and that onion is just a little bit too thick, and you're like, wow, this onion I'm tasting, and the only thing I'm tasting is very oniony. But anyway, sorry, I am getting so fucking off track tonight.
No, this is good. I feel like we're on it again. I like this. Okay, so the Cambridge Analytica team contracted with John Bolton's Political Action Committee for this project, and Bolton would later reach out to Peter for help securing a position in Trump's cabinet. More on that later. Speaking of Thiel, though, back in the States, Peter was having a rough go of it.
Right now, Peter Thiel is suing the U.S. government for not letting him sell them something. That is currently Peter Thiel's strategy. Sue the person that you want to woo. Which you think, wow, that's stupid. He wasn't the first person to do it successfully. And we'll get to that in just a second.
Right. Further, JP Morgan halted its use of Metropolis completely by 2013. And by 2016, Palantir had been fired by Coca-Cola, Amex, NASDAQ, and Peter was trying to broker a sale of the company to Larry Ellison. There was never a single venture of Peter Thiel's where he wasn't trying to bitch out at some point in the process.
Everything was on fire.
Yes. This was not a calculated man working to some ultimate hyper-enriching outcome. This was a man running around with his hair on fire.
Yeah, trying to put out a house fire with a mop bucket. Like, he was losing his shit.
The whole time.
Yeah.
A lot was riding on that lawsuit of his, and the Army had a pretty strong case to make. When Palantir ultimately did receive a request for information, and they did, they filled the application out incorrectly, and the service they were offering only accommodated like half of the Army's requirement. It wasn't even a complete offering for what the Army needed. Unbelievably, though, Peter Thiel fucking won.
Yep.
And later that year, he would celebrate a victory by proxy and would join Donald Trump at Trump Tower and welcome the powerful tech executives he had helped invite.
This is Peter Thiel's thing, right? Yeah. Someone said this about Elon Musk. This dude is like one of the luckiest people that history has ever encountered. He keeps making these long shot bets that shouldn't work. Like they're bad decisions with the information that you have at the time. And sure, he hedges. And if you read The Contrarian, you'll kind of see how he's trying to play both sides, which is relatively impressive. But he makes these long shot bets that shouldn't fucking work. And somehow, while he is freaking out as any rational person would, he somehow comes out on top.
How I would describe Peter Thiel's business strategy is you can't say no to me. That was how he sold PayPal, which was a bad product. It was horribly imperfect, hemorrhaging money.
He is great at understanding that it is not the product you sell, but it is putting all of your efforts into who you can sell it to.
And how easy it is for them to say no.
Yep, there's got to be some idiot somewhere who can be pushed hard enough and be in a position of high enough import that my shitty product will sell. And again, he seems to be right. Like we're doing a podcast about him. So while a ton of it has been blind luck and rage, he's worth a couple $1 billion. But, you know, with that, Peter Thiel has invested, especially in the past 10 years, a lot of his time and his efforts and his money shaping the world as he sees it, perceptively. And this brings us to chapter 2. What the fuck does Peter Thiel actually believe?
Yeah. So the contrarian spends a great deal of its length, and this is how I hear people talking about Peter Thiel anyways. It spends all this time talking about the world that Peter Thiel wants to create. And Money Mike, tell me your thoughts on this. But here's Peter Thiel. In the early 2010s, he invests in Airbnb and Lyft and TaskRabbit and Postmates, and the book stresses that he's doing this with the intent to undermine labor laws and to help create this libertarian dystopia where he and his tech buddies get to rule. And he's investing in Clearview, that freaky airport face scanning startup with his buddies from the Gawker killing days, and Anduril, which contracts with ICE, and on and on and on. If you ask me what Peter Thiel wants, it is the chair he was sitting in Trump Tower. Will all those tech executives filed into the room? Does he harbor a repulsive disregard to human life? Yes, hell yes, he does. But that's not why he's doing any of this. He isn't investing in Airbnb to undermine vacation rental laws and make housing affordable only to folks like him. He's investing in Airbnb because he knows that if they can skirt vacation rental laws, they stand to make a fortune, and he won't suffer any of the fallout. It's a money-making thing, and that's it. He's investing in Lyft because he sees a way to outmaneuver labor legislation and pay people a less than living wage, which means he makes more money. It's not that he wants people to suffer. It's that he wants to make more, and the suffering is a consequence to which he is deeply indifferent. If we look at Thiel's other investments, we see a freakish, paranoid, racist security hawk for a moment. But then we just see investments. This is the big problem with deifying any of these bastards. None of them are intentionally building a world while they make their fortunes. And Peter Thiel is no exception. He's a colonizer looking for resources he can make off with. He didn't invest all that money in J.D. Vance's VC fund and then push him to run for office because he wants J.D. Vance to write any specific legislation. He invested in the VC fund to make money and promote a sycophant, and later pushed him to run for office because he wants people in high places playing defense for his bottom line. Yep. If he was so invested in America's future, he wouldn't have spent all that time and money on citizenship in New Zealand. It's a hedge. It's all a hedge. America is not any part of his end goal. Here's my take on this. People like Peter Thiel aren't in politics for anything beyond money. The accompanying worldview they're selling is either means to very high-paying ends, or it's a distraction. With a dipshit like Elon Musk, this will manifest itself as Elon giving a Hitler salute. With someone like Peter Thiel, political beliefs will appear to gargle up from the center of the earth. He pays others to make the noise. That's how it works. If it seems as though they agree with you, that's because your interests happen to complement theirs and the interests of their shareholders. As soon as that ceases to be the case, you can wave goodbye to all of the camaraderie you thought was there. Elon Musk is anti-immigration until you come after H-1B visas on which his business depends. Then he's an adamant globalist. Peter Thiel is willing to create a constitutional crisis to supposedly prevent invasions of privacy by the likes of Gawker until he realizes there's a fortune to be made by selling data on your every move. Then he's all in. These people are not invested in any future for anyone but them. They're aliens, here to harvest our resources and get back to their safe haven in the clouds. And the one thing more dangerous than wanting to join them is being foolish enough to think that they're here to help you or anyone else join their ranks.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, with people like Peter Thiel, and I'm going to sound a little bit more direct than I often do, but it is an us versus them.
Yeah.
And if an individual like us, if our interests temporarily align with someone like Peter Thiel or Elon Musk or Bill Gates or insert name here.
Yeah.
It may be tempting to see them as a champion to further your cause. I don't really care what side of the political aisle you sit on. We are often encouraged or tempted to choose champions. And we are often encouraged to believe that the more power that we give our champions, the more power they will have to do our bidding. But we have to realize that is not how it works. Our champions do their own bidding. And their bidding, like Peter Thiel's or Elon Musk's, will change with the will of the wisps.
Yeah.
And once we've given them that power, they will not give it back. So the champion that you've chosen, that you've rallied behind today, don't be surprised when they do something to fuck you, because they don't care about you. They
do not.
They never will. There is so much higher probability that people who make less than $100 million or less than $1 million a year, that our interests are going to align and stay aligned than anyone else that we might perceive as having enough power to be chosen as a social change champion. There are no heroes in that arena. Not for us.
Yeah. You asked about this earlier, and you were going to bring up Elon Musk suing the government.
Oh, yeah. The reason that Peter Thiel thought that he could sue the government to get the government's business is because Elon Musk also sued the government to get the government's business, and it fucking worked.
It worked. God damn it.
These guys, like whenever I see crypto dudes get a hard-on for people like Elon or Peter Thiel or just any of these plutocrats, I realize it's because they are kindred fucking spirits.
Yeah.
These little boys, like, hinging it all on a fucking moonshot. And this is what happens when they just win that fucking lottery. But anyway.
No, 100%.
That's enough of my preaching.
No, it's all good. And with that, it is crutches time. Consumer harm, I'll stick to this. The Palantir software was a nice to have, not a need to have. If Palantir wants the marketing to be there, 30 fucking soldiers died.
Yeah.
Yeah, if we want to lean into Cambridge Analytica, boy, is there a lot to lean into there. Rich parents, Money Mike, I'm going to look to you as the tiebreaker. Yeah,
I say no.
I kind of say no too.
I mean, being well-to-do definitely gives somebody the courage to take risks knowing that they can go home if they need to.
Yeah.
But I don't think that Peter Thiel's parents rose to the level of he never really had to work. You know,
yeah, and there was no connection there where the connection, the hands were shaken, and then his destiny was sealed in stone. He was guaranteed to be rich. That wasn't there like it was for Aliko Dangote or Elon Musk or Bill Gates. Yeah, exactly. Union suppression, his investments allowing the massive success of Lyft, TaskRabbit, and Postmates sure haven't done anything to help the average person trying to keep the lights on in their house. Money Mike, I'm going to look to you again on this one. What do you think?
I'm going to say no.
Okay.
Because, you know, the thing that we just spent 5 minutes harping on is the fact that Peter Thiel doesn't seem to have consistent beliefs. He wasn't investing in Lyft and Postmates because he had a hard-on for suppressing people's vocations.
100%.
He's got a hard-on for making money. Yeah,
That's it. Yeah. Hey, this idea can do this. There was no consideration for the end result there. Yeah. It was, hey, if we can skirt this, we'll make a fortune.
Yep.
That's how this works.
That's what happened.
Yep. Tax evasion. A huge portion of Peter Thiel's wealth is in a tax-free Roth IRA. Yep. This didn't come up organically in the story, so it's here. This is an investment vehicle designed to help working people prepare for retirement. We crucified Mitt Romney during election season back in 2012 for having $100 million in his Roth IRA. I think it's appropriate to chastise Peter Thiel for keeping several $billion in his. I say he gets the D all day.
Oh, all day. All fucking day.
Yep. Child labor allegations? None yet. I think, again, what Peter Thiel is, what all of his peers are opportunists. If there is an opportunity to utilize child labor in Iowa or whatever fucking states have already legalized it, just be on the lookout. Yeah, totally. It's not him. It's not his kid. Harassment allegations. I am reasonably convinced Thiel will die without checking this box. He is nothing if not constrained. Egregious behavior after hours. The hypocrisy of the whole Gawker thing and the precedent that sets up. I say that gets him this. I'm open to your thoughts. It's Bond villain shit.
Yeah, for sure. But gang, I think that is the end of our 4-hour conversation. Actually, probably more like 5.5 after all the editing and stuff about a little mean person named Peter Thiel.
Thank you so much for listening. Deco19, thank you again for the recommendation.
Yeah, and we really hope that we did it justice. There was a ton to focus on here. There was some stuff, I'm going to use the phrase that we missed. We didn't miss it. We just had to create some sort of narrative, and there was no way that we were catching everything in that net. This is already 4 hours long. But yeah, we love you all. Thanks for listening, and goodbye.